Welcome back to another episode so spicy, even Bob Vylan himself is probably trying to figure out how to censor it. In today's absolute cinema, we're diving headfirst into Bob Vylan chant controversy at Glastonbury, because apparently some people just can't resist setting fire to their own careers in front of tens of thousands of people. Be well, strap in, because this one's a masterclass in what happens when you decide to go full chaos mode on TV. So here's the rundown. Bob Vylan, the punk rap duo, hit the West Holt stage at Glastonbury. You know, the biggest, most iconic music festival in the UK, broadcast across the world by the BBC. And what did frontman Bobby Vylan decide to do? Oh, just lead a little chant of death, death to the IDF.
Death, death to the IDF. Death, death to the IDF.
Yeah, you heard that right. Not free Palestine, not end the occupation, which, while still political, is a whole different ballgame. But straight up death chants against the National Army and, of course, the crowd, as crowds do, joined in.
Death, death to the IDF.
Absolutely incredible. He also had a screen behind him flashing messages like Israel's actions in Gaza are genocide. Not exactly subtle, is it? Now, as of today, the chickens are definitely coming home to roost for our boy Bobby. That's right, the US State Department with Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau dropped the hammer on X, said, "Nah, mate, foreigners who glorify violence and hatred are not welcome visitors in our country." Poof, gone. The US tour, set for October and November, is officially in the bin. You'll love to see it. Reportedly, their talent agency UTA has already cut ties and removed them from their website because, shocker, major agencies aren't exactly lining up to represent artists who are facing criminal investigations and international condemnation.
Bob Vylan has now been dropped by his agent after a controversial Glastonbury gig.
Who would have thought? The Avon and Somerset police are reviewing footage to see if any criminal offences were committed. Public order incident, they're calling it. Because inciting hatred and calls for violence, turns out that's generally frowned upon by the law, even if it is at a free speech festival. Oh, the BBC, the public broadcaster that aired this whole debacle live. They initially put up a warning about very strong and discriminatory language, then had to backtrack harder than a snail on a greased pole, admitting the sentiments were utterly unacceptable and anti-Semitic. And that with hindsight, we should have pulled the stream during the performance. Hindsight? Mate, you're telling me you couldn't see that train wreck coming from a mile away? Ofcom, the UK media watchdog, is now saying the BBC clearly has questions to answer. There are even calls for the BBC director Tim Davies' resignation. Festival organiser Emily Avis, in a joint statement with Glastonbury, said the chants very much crossed the line, and there is no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism, hate speech or incitement to violence, which you know is a nice sentiment after it's already happened and gone viral. The UK's favourite Prime Minister Keir Starmer called it appalling hate speech. Health Secretary Wes Streeting said it was appalling and a shameless publicity stunt.
And of course the comments that he made were completely disgraceful, but I also suspect were attention seeking and publicity seeking.
Even the Israeli embassy in the UK weighed in, deeply disturbed by the rhetoric. In classic internet fashion, Bobby Vylan's initial response on Instagram was a defiant "I said what I said," followed by a statement about teaching our children to speak up for change they want and need. Oh, the fucking bravery. Encouraging kids to chant death to the IDF is definitely the path to a better world, right? Because nothing screams positive societal change like advocating for the elimination of a military force on a global stage. He also apparently posted about Zionists crying on socials while eating an ice cream. The absolute pseudo-intellectual here trying to act like a Sigma male when in reality he's just digging himself a deeper hole. You're not sticking it to the man, mate. You're getting your US visas revoked and your career imploded. Now, this isn't the first time the lines of free speech and incitement have blurred in the UK, especially when it comes to social media and public platforms. We just saw the whole Lucy Connolly situation. Remember, this Tory councillor's wife, Lucy, got herself a nice 31-month prison sentence for a single tweet. Her post following the Southport knife attacks, calling for mass deportation now, and for hotels housing asylum seekers to be set on fire. And if that makes me racist, so be it. She proudly declared that shit. A few hours later, deleted. But too late. The damage was already done. Her husband tried to play victim, saying she loved African and Asian heritage children as a childminder. Mate, what does that even mean? You're telling me her personal childcare preferences negate calling for arson and violence against an entire group of people? This is the kind of selective outrage that drives normal people insane. Lucy Connolly's appeal was quashed because apparently advocating for burning buildings is actually against the law. Who knew? So while Bob Vylan is out there chanting death on a global stage, Lucy Connolly is in the clink for a tweet. The British public naturally is having an absolute meltdown online. In the UK right now, it's a battleground of free speech absolutists versus hate speech should be illegal warriors. Many are arguing that while Bob Vylan's chants were distasteful or even abhorrent, criminalising them sets a dangerous precedent. They point to the Lucy Connolly case as an example of what happens when the law gets too involved regulating speech, fearing a chilling effect on legitimate protest or dissenting opinion. unions. If she got jailed for a tweet, why is this allowed? It's a common refrain, demanding consistency in how the law is applied. Oh, I get it. So some death chants are okay, but other death threats are a no-no. Good to know where we stand on the spectrum of acceptable genocide rhetoric. They often argue that incitement should only apply if it leads to imminent lawless action, not just offensive words. You know, like saying don't walk across that freshly mopped floor isn't incitement to slit, but run Forrest run right before he trips is. It's all about context, right? On the other side, many are demanding accountability, particularly from the BBC. Death to the IDF is seen as not a political protest, but as a direct call for violence, especially by those who view the IDF as defending Israel.
And let's not forget that it is the IDF that has just recently saved the Western world from the threat of an Iranian nuclear bomb under the control of the theocratic mullahs.
For many, particularly within the Jewish community, this crosses a clear line into anti-Semitism and incitement. They argue that platforms like Glastonbury and the BBC have a responsibility to not amplify such messages.
We should make it illegal for entertainers or sports people to get in to actually use their platforms for political views.
Regardless of the artist's intent. If you preach hate, you face consequences is the vibe, because you know it's totally cool to stand for free speech unless that speech makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable. In which case, call the police and burn down the internet. They're probably also calling for stricter rules on what kind of thoughts you're allowed to have, just in case. This whole situation highlights the messy reality of trying to define hate speech in an era where everyone has a megaphone and emotions are running hotter than ever. Was Bob Vylan's chant grotesque? Absolutely. Should it be criminalised? That's where the real fight is. The fundamental question for how many Brits right now is, where does freedom of expression end and where does incitement and hatred begin? And are we applying the rules evenly, or are some people getting a free pass while others are locked up for a single stupid tweet? And here's where the whole thing gets the chef's kiss levels of ironic. Bob Vylan's chanting death to the IDF while simultaneously the IDF is, actually causing death and destruction in Gaza. It's like complaining about a leaky faucet while the entire house is actively on fire. The sheer audacity of Western artists from their privileged stages screaming death to a military force, when that military force's actions have, by multiple reports from international bodies and human rights organisations, resulted in tens of thousands of civilian casualties in Gaza, including a horrifying number of women and children. Oh, the irony. We're all here debating the words of a punk rap duo while simultaneously actual bombs are dropping and lives are being lost in a conflict that has devastated an entire feckin' population. It's almost like the world has a severe case of selective outrage. How dare you say death to the IDF when they're merely delivering death to, the people in feckin' Gaza. The chutzpah is truly breathtaking. The whole situation just begs the question, are we more offended by provocative words or by the actual consequences of war? And is the focus on Bob Vylan's incitement a convenient distraction from the very real human suffering that's being debated? It's only for you to decide. What do you make of this double standard being called out online? Is the law being applied fairly, or are some expressions more equal than others? Peace.